The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we're going to review Austin's 1-1 draw versus LAFC, the 1-0 victory on the road in Minnesota. We're also going to be joined by Apple TV's Nate Bukati to help us preview the Sporting Kansas City match. Then we're going to talk about our new center back signing and then the arrival of one of the other signings this week. My name is Landon Cottam, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley. Our guest once again by Jeremiah Bentley.
Yeah, no, man. Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and it felt very weird last week to say hello, friends. Like, I feel like I should always defer that to Mike when we're doing it. It was a strange line, but I'm glad to have you back, buddy, man. How were your travels?
They were wonderful. We spent a few days in Zurich and then the rest of the time in Italy. I think if you'd asked me several years ago, like if there even were mountains in Italy, I probably would have ignorantly said no. But we spent some time up in like the Dolomites, like in the Italian Alps. It was fantastic. Highly recommended.
Wow. That sounds great.
Well, ended up watching a lot of the Euros in Swiss German and Italian, which means I didn't have to tune into the Fox broadcasts.
Oh yeah, that was probably a treat. Well, we went all the way to San Antonio over the weekend and last week, and at one point, like, it was raining and we were at a resort. It was raining, and so like my younger son and my wife went to watch Inside Out 2, and my older son and I went to watch the Euros at a bar. So it felt very much like an on-brand Bentley family experience. I mean, it's been a very exciting tournament so far. I just love having big-time soccer back, and between that and Copa America, like it's a fun time to be alive and watching soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we get into the story of the week?
We can't. Wait, one more thing. Let's talk about Wednesday night.
Yes.
Wednesday night, we're going to do soccer trivia with Austin Community Soccer Association at Turnstile. Sign up start at 6. Trivia starts at 7. The one thing I wanted to emphasize to everybody is, like, this is not I don't know if you've even seen the questions, but this is not like a hardcore statistical analysis of soccer. So if you know soccer movies, if you know soccer culture, if you have any idea about the films of Matthew McConaughey, like, show up. Like, this is the kind of soccer trivia for you. There will be prizes for overall winners and just like random stuff we give out throughout the night. So like, I would hope that we see several of you out there on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I was not involved in the creation of these questions because I was out of the country the whole time. So none of the nerd stuff is in there. If you've played or know anything about ACSA, it's a very fun soccer league. If you've ever met Alyssa, she's a very fun person. And so Jeremiah and Alyssa and that league being involved means it's guaranteed to be a good time, even though I haven't seen any of the questions yet.
Awesome. Okay, now story of the week, Landon. Let's get into that.
Let's get into it. And I would like to preface all of the rest of the show by saying my internal clock is still on European time, which means my brain and body think it's, 5 a.m. right now. So I'm going to do my best to stay coherent. I think I have a good grasp on these games, but bear with me. Where should we start?
Yeah, I was going to say, you didn't live through the sort of the anxiety of the moment on both these matches to really like take it all in. So I think let's just start with the positive. Is I think that anybody objectively would say Austin having a 4-point week with LAFC on the road, who's a top team in the West, LAFC at home, who's a top team in the West, and then Minnesota United on the road, who was also one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the West, is like a good result in a week. And yet it did not seem like that at all.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. It's going to be interesting to see how our views on these games differ as well, because you're right. I did not live through the LAFC game live. I actually didn't watch it, period, until after the Minnesota game. So I did get to see the Minnesota game live on TV and then watch the LAFC game the next day. And Mike Cagnola actually texted me today saying, I can't say, like, he was curious to hear my thoughts on the game because I think he had seen some negativity about this Minnesota game, and he was at the game in Minnesota. And I think his perception was like there in the stadium, it felt okay. Like he was pretty pleased with the performance, but it doesn't seem to be the case for at least some of the fan base. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I don't know which one we wanted to get into first. I know, like I said, we were in San Antonio, so I was watching the LAFC game with a bunch of friends who everybody's expecting to lose, and then everybody thought like maybe the inclement weather would benefit the slower, less athletic team, which is awesome. Which I think there's probably no doubt that it did. But then like this Kei Kamara goal is just so late when it seems like Austin is like against all odds going to pick up this win that they don't deserve. And then it was just like one of those gut punch goals, right? Like
Yeah.
right at the end of the match, like not super within the run of play. And when Mike and I interviewed Keith Costigan last week, he's like, "Watch out for Kei Kamara," which I didn't even remember he was even on LAFC.
Yeah.
And he hadn't scored a goal, and then for him to like pull in and score that goal, it's like, oh man, it just really soured what could have been a really unexpected positive result. And I think that sort of led into how everybody felt, in the game. Sorry, on the game on Saturday, which. Well, when we get into the details of it, I'm very interested in your perspective on it. But it felt like Austin was not playing like a team that was a man up, other than the one goal from Diego Rubio.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can get into it in the second segment. I don't feel too bad about either of these games, honestly. And I think if I'd have watched the LAFC one live, I probably would feel differently about it. But I woke up the next morning and saw 1-1, and then saw like the difference in the number of shots taken and all that, and I was like, oh, Austin probably like made it as ugly as possible and then stole a goal at the end or whatever. And then after watching the game, I was like, oh, Austin like was fairly in control for the first little stretch of this game, and then after the goal was when things started to kind of shift a little bit possession wise. But I think like a third of their shots came after the 80th minute or something like that. So it wasn't like LAFC was really dominating us for most of this game. And then, like you say, Kei Kamara is timeless and undeniable.
Kei Kamara, yeah. Yeah.
But
no doubt about
it
that.
leaves at the end of the week leaves us at 8th in the West. I mean, I think y'all talked about Andrew Wiebe's path to 45 points that he brought up on Twitter. I kind of redid the math now. And if I did the math right, again, I'm very jet lagged and not good at math when I'm at my best. But I think in our current state, we need to have something like 1.28 points per game for the rest of the year in order to get to that 45 points, which should secure us a playoff spot. So all in all, like we're in decent shape at the moment. That's not an insane clip to hit for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and you hit on it because we did talk about that. I think Austin was at 1.28 going into this week points per game and needed to get to 1.38 from there on out to hit that 45. 4 points in 2 matches, that exceeds that, and that has now flipped that math. So, again, like on the face of it, I guess what I would really say is like I felt very frustrated, and I think a lot of fans did, and especially during the Minnesota match when it seemed like Austin was absorbing pressure needlessly, and then at the end of it, like it was a really good outcome. And sometimes you just have to take yourself out of sort of like the emotion of the moment and just like appreciate what happened during the week. It's like it was a good week overall. Then the other thing, we've talked a lot about this belief that we have, this like Austin just needs to hang on around the playoff line, somewhere until the reinforcements arrive in the summer. We're going to talk about what some of those reinforcements are. Then I got to reflecting on that. Like, is that actually like a stated goal from anywhere, or has that just been like all of our belief that that's what Austin is trying to do?
I mean, yeah, Josh Wolf reiterated in, I think, the midweek press conference last week that the goal is to make the playoffs. And I mean, yeah, I don't know that they've outright said like we're just holding on until these new guys can come in, but it very much seems to be the goal. I think Keith Costigan brought this up when y'all interviewed him last week, but it's if you're banking on new people to come in and transform your team, it's probably not going to work. Like that's not going to be the case. And so you can't, like, I don't think Austin can afford to save it all for when those guys are here, because once they get here, who knows how long it'll take them to get settled, get integrated, all that, and like actually be contributing factors on the field. But I mean, like, I want to talk about this when we get into the new signing, Ukrainian center back Alexander Svatok. Like a lot of these moves are not necessarily for this year. Like, yeah, they're going to play this year, but these are longer term moves. And so regardless, yeah, I think they're trying to make it to the playoffs. I don't think we can leave too much work for that part of the season, though, because it's only a handful of games. If we're too far back at that point, then I don't think it's going to matter how many of these guys are in or playing. If we need to hit 2 points a game at that point, I still don't think this team is going to be solid enough to do that, even with these new guys in the team.
Yeah, and then so now it's 20 matches into the season. Austin's in 8th, on 27 points. It's kind of Roto's like first official full season. So like, where do you feel like almost 2/3 of the way through the year? Like, is this a positive season or negative season so far? Because we talked, I think when we did the season preview show, which I have not listened to because I feel like we all predicted Austin's ceiling was very low. And I don't want to remember like how negative I was about it, but like how do you judge the performance so far? Just like at the highest possible level.
I mean, I feel at the moment I feel quite good about it, but we're still in this stretch. I think it's 4 or 5 more games before any of these new signings can play.
Yeah, 5.
How many games before, like minimum, before we get Pereira and Cascante back?
So it's at least two more before we get those guys back, and that's if they both bomb out in the group play.
Right.
So it's still a pretty thin roster, right, for the next little bit.
Yeah. So in these next handful of games, like we could drop 3 or 4 places, and I probably won't feel so good about it. But if we can hang around that like 6th, 7th, 8th spot, because the points are all very tight right now, right? Like between that whole middle pack in the West is very close. And so if we can just stay in that pack, I'll still feel quite good about this season. And if these new guys can come in and boost us even a little bit, like that gets us into the playoffs, so they can gel enough to like actually make a little bit of run in the playoffs, that's icing on the cake. But again, like all these signings, everything that's happening right now, I don't know that any of it is necessarily meant to make this season any better. I think it's just kind of bonus if it does.
I think it does. And I think one thing I keep going back to is that without fail, like every player that Roto has brought in so far this year is better than the player that went out and they've replaced. And it seems like that has happened without mortgaging any future potential for Austin FC, which is really all you want, right? Austin, yeah. Like, at the end of the day, the worst possible thing that's going on is like Austin is increasing the floor for this team, both this year and in future seasons, and especially in a year when we know there's a lot of spend coming off the books at the end of this year. There's the potential to grow even more. So, okay, I feel better, Landon. I appreciate your perspective. Like I was really down on how everything was going after I like watching the matches live during the week. But this is the good thing about having 2 days in between the Saturday match and Monday. It's like the clarity and perspective to really look at it in the bigger picture and not be so absorbed in the moment.
Well, yeah, we'll take a break, but when we come back, we'll get into the details of these games. But I don't know. I'm kind of an optimistic person in general, but let's see if maybe I can't lighten your mood a little bit more with my take on these games.
Okay, sounds good. Let's take a break.
When no one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders and no parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Let's jump into this LAFC game. So Austin drew at home on a very rainy Saturday night against LAFC, 1-1.
Wednesday it landed, by the way. I wrote that script. I wrote that wrong in the script.
A very wet Wednesday night here in Austin, avoiding a 4th straight loss. So this was a kind of a poor stretch leading into that international break, a bad game coming off the international break in Colorado. And so having LAFC come to town, I think they're now first place in the Western Conference. So in really good shape at the moment. I don't know that many people had a lot of hope leading into this one as far as what the result was going to be, but up for most of the game. I think they scored in the 19th minute. Jader Obrian gets a goal, and then Austin holds on until the very end. And as you mentioned before, Kei Kamara comes in and does what Kei Kamara has been doing in this league for over 15 years, which is scoring goals by jumping really high and getting the ball on his head.
Yeah. And so ultimately, like it's probably a deserved result. I mean, it's stuff like, Austin shut Denny Bouanga down for like the whole match, which Austin deserves credit for doing, which hasn't always happened. So for sure, like ultimately, like on the stat sheet, it turned out pretty well. It was, I think, just the way that things happen. Like as I mentioned before, probably the most frustrating part. This is the middle part of, again, 3 matches in 8 days. A lot of questions about whether it would play a factor. Ultimately, I think it does, and I think it does in Austin's favor because it was a very wet game on that night. Maybe just like we'll set it up a little bit. So lineup wise. It's not surprising lineup at all. So we get Stuver, Buru, Heinz, Ike, Vyson, Gallagher on the back, Ring, Valencia, and Driussi in the midfield, Finley, Rubio, and Obrian up front. Austin looked good early. I think when that goal comes, that's like not surprising because it seems like Austin was the better team attack in the first half. But maybe let's talk through like what led to the Obrian goal that gave Austin the lead.
Yeah, and I think a theme throughout this game was Sebastian Driussi. I thought he had a decent offensive game as far as putting his stamp on it there, but defensively, he made a lot of really solid plays, just like taking the ball off of LAFC players, and really kind of gumming up the works for them on many different occasions. And this is what happens here. Atuesta receives the ball, makes a turn. He kind of bumps into the ref for a moment. There was some discussion on the broadcast about that. I'm not sure how much it actually affected it, but Driussi comes through. Atuesta takes the ball off of him. It falls to Obrian. Obrian drives at the back line, kind of takes a little soft touch to his right to open up his hips to take that shot, strikes it seems to hit it hard, and maybe the original shot with the original trajectory would have challenged Hugo Lloris, but it takes a deflection off of one of their defenders, and I think really throws off the keeper's dive, and it goes in. He had no chance of getting off that deflection. So I think the deflection did really help, but everything leading up to it was really well done by Austin, but it all starts with Driussi's defensive work, which was there all night.
Yeah, that reminds me. When I saw that goal, one of the things I thought of was our discussion from a few weeks ago about what's an own goal and what is like a deflected goal that the offensive player still gets credit for. And this seemed like what, I mean, this is one where it counts, right? Because that was a shot on target that gets deflected away from the keeper, but the play on it doesn't actually change whether the ball is going to be like on frame or not. So
right, the deflection caused the goal, but because it was on target, then Obrian still gets the credit.
He still gets credit for it. It was great. It's great for my Golden Boot team, although it's not going as well as one would want. And then, I mean, beyond that, Austin absorbs a lot of pressure. I feel like we can get into this when we talk about the next game. I feel like Austin intentionally was absorbing pressure. Maybe in this game with the lead, knowing it was a wet track and sort of knowing what was going on. There's just not a ton of like, what are the shots here? So it's like, LA takes 14 shots, only 1 on target. Like X goals is super low. So
and like I said, I think 5 of those shots came after like the 79th or 80th minute. So it wasn't like Austin was getting barraged by shots before that point. It was really at the end when LAFC starts throwing a lot of those numbers forward. One, tell me, like, again, while I was out, I was pretty much not looking at the internet, not on Slack, not on Twitter, nothing. But I think I did see a couple of spots where folks were upset with the substitution at the end of the game. Was that a general sentiment with Matt Hedges being subbed on towards the end?
Oh, I mean,
I've got no problem with that. Like,
generally among people who want to criticize every single substitution, absolutely. I mean, generally, like, you're up 1-0, there's 10 minutes left or less than 10 minutes left in a match that probably a lot of people that Austin wasn't going to win. Is going more defensive like a bad idea? It doesn't seem like it would be at that point. Like, what I would have a problem with is if this substitution is at 50 or coming out of half or whatever. But you're sort of down at the end of things, right? Where that's where you can like go super defensive and try to hang on for a few minutes. This is going to be my problem with the Minnesota thing, which may be where we argue later about how defensive Austin went early. But yeah, for this one, I have no issue with this substitution.
Yeah, I mean, Kei Kamara is on the field. He's giving Austin fits. It doesn't always, not in ways that are leading to super dangerous moments all the time, but he's such a dominant presence in the air that I think it only helps to have more big guys in the box, and especially guy, especially in a moment where LAFC's got nothing else to lose. They're going to start throwing those numbers forward. Yeah, I mean, that's what you do in that moment. Yeah, like you said, if it happens at 57, sure, but Hedges gets subbed on at 80 in the 83rd minute. And so at that point in the game, I think that's the right call. And it ends up not working, but I don't think it was because Matt Hedges was on the field. Like, I think it was just, that's the state of the game at the point. You put on the players that you think can weather that state of the game. It ends up not working. But yeah, I don't have any problem with it.
Well, I guess one other player moment that you would think would end up harming Austin for the weekend, and somehow it doesn't, was in the 63rd minute. Johan Valencia picks up a yellow card, which is his 5th yellow card, which will put him out for suspend on yellow card accumulation for the weekend, with a midfield that is already very weakened by the fact that Danny Pereira is on international duty. So that was definitely a rough moment for the team. Maybe it works out okay because now he gets to reset and Austin gets 4 points in a week, but that was just like good fortune and not strategic thinking by Johan Valencia.
Yeah, I think Austin dodged a bullet with that one because it could have been a bad deal. Owen Wolf steps into that spot in the midfield against Minnesota, and I thought he had a good game there. So, but it really does start to strain depth on the wing, and we'll talk about this with this other one. But it could be a problem going forward if Valencia's missing on a different week or when different things happen. Because we are pretty thin right now.
Well, I don't know if there's a lot more to talk about. Did you have any other player notes you want to talk about out of Wednesday?
I think I can kind of wrap some of these into the full notes for the week. So let's move on to Minnesota.
Right, so Austin goes to Minnesota on Saturday, picks up a surprise 3 points on the road. Pregame, we've talked about this. Like, Austin's roster is already thin. And then Sebastian Driussi, who did not show up on the injury report. Suddenly, an hour before the game, the lineup comes out, and not only is he not in the starting 11, but he's also not on the bench, which is reported first on the Spanish broadcast that he's out with a virus. And then we would see he shows up in the post-game photo, the victory celebration photo, which, by the way, CJ Foder may be the fittest person I've ever seen in my life. Like, if there's one thing you're checking out the photo, like, the guy has like 16, 18 abs. I didn't even know you could have that many.
Yeah.
But but it does lead you to believe that it's not something that's going to be long term, right? If it's like, I think it was contagious, that maybe would like threaten the health of his fellow players, he would not be standing next to everybody in the photo. So hopefully this is a one-time thing. Well, I believe this is a one-time thing, that hopefully he'll be back on Saturday. But definitely, when you look at that roster, I think there was it like 5 players on the bench that were outfield players at all?
Maybe just 4.
Maybe fewer? Maybe 4?
I think there were
2
5
keepers.
Yeah, let me look.
There's
it
2
was
keepers
1,
for
2,
sure.
3, 4, 5, 6. So we had 7 on the bench, but 2 of them were keepers. One of them is Alonso Ramirez, who is called up from the second team. And so it's 2 fullbacks, a center back, a second team midfielder, and CJ Foder as the only like proper attacking option off the bench.
So that does not lead one to have a lot of excitement about how this might turn out. Luckily, on the other side of things, Minnesota United is also missing a lot of key players. I think they had 4 players that are international duty. Pukki out of injury. Then we talked about the lineup, and I want to ask about formation things, because usually I don't buy what we saw, but I think this is actually a 4-4-2.
Yeah,
Austin did not see a lot of.
I was skeptical even with like, okay, the graphic comes out, it's a 4-4-2. We know Rubio is generally a striker, but he's played as an out-and-out 10 for us a couple of times this year. So yeah. I was not super convinced that it would be a straight-up 4-4-2, but it pretty much was. I think the attacking shape at times ended up being almost more like and this is all splitting hairs when we're talking about, because the shapes are fluid. It's never actually what the formation is, but it almost seemed more of like a 2-4-4, where those wingers were still pushing up high, but Rubio and Zardes were both playing on that high line. Rubio, of course, dropping in deeper more often than Zardes, but both of them kind of rotating off that line and dropping in to combine with the midfield at times. And then Gallagher and Biru kind of joining the midfield 4 and staying a little bit deeper. Biru, of course, would get forward as play allowed at times, and was pretty dangerous in some of those moments. But it was a little bit of a different look. And then defensively, it kind of dropped back into that 4-4-2, which is nothing new. That's the thing we've seen. But I think it was, if we're going to call it one set of numbers, it was a 4-4-2.
Yeah, so that's same back 4 as the match before. Then the 4 in the middle are Finley, Ring, Wolf, Obrian, which are basically the only options that Austin has there. Like, the players that the 11 Austin had, but literally the only 11 that Austin can field. And the question really becomes where they line up. And then Rubio and Zardes up top, like you said, as opposed to Rubio sort of being underneath. One thing I'll just say off the top, because like the dude gets a lot of criticism for a lot of people, including me, is like Jesse Zardes did not do anything like particularly amazing or really positive, but the guy worked his butt off all night, both in attack and in defense. And for the match like there was on Saturday night, that was exactly what Austin needed. Like, he wasn't super threatening, but he, like, honestly, it was the best defensive game I've ever seen him play in Austin. Yeah. And one that was needed. I
thought he was really strong in that way. I thought Finley and Obrian in both of these games, the LAFC game and the Minnesota game, both had just the amount of effort put forth on the defensive side of the ball in both of these games was really admirable by both these guys, and really helpful in what the team was trying to do.
So let's maybe go through a couple of there's not a ton of moments, I think, that are like singular outside of the context of the game. So there's this non-handball on, is it Johnny Russell? Who was it in the 20th minute?
No, Johnny Russell's SKC. It was maybe Will Trap, no, or maybe Tapias, Miguel Tapias. I don't remember. A ball comes in from wide, gets popped up in the air, and it falls down onto a player's outstretched arm in the box. And I know y'all talked about the non-call handballs in the Colorado game and in this one, but like the phrase that gets thrown out is like natural position, but like I'm convinced as much as ever that just doesn't mean anything. Like, what is a natural position? If your body can do it without hurting you, that is a natural position, natural? Right? Like, what is
because his arms were kind of out. It was Trap, by the way. I was thinking it's a guy that's been around for a long time, okay. And I couldn't remember which of the guys it was. But yeah, it was Trap. But yeah, I mean, if your like arms are not pinned to your body and sort of sticking out, and a ball comes down and hits them, that seems like not a natural position. But that was one where I think it. One of the pool reporters asked Pro on that, and that was the answer. Weeby believes that to be true. I saw that today. So yeah, I do not get the way the handball rule is called, but I also don't get the way this game is refereed all, overall.
Yeah, so it was weird.
Yeah. So the handball being wrong is like, just, it's another thing that happens.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, to be clear, like, I don't know that I would necessarily want this ball to be called a penalty. But I feel like I've seen this ball be called a penalty many times this year in this league. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I think there needs to be some just like clearer guidance to help referees in these moments to say like, this is a handball or this is not. It feels like they're playing Calvin ball with it and just whatever they feel like is right in the moment, which it's the best they have, but it just feels like there's so much subjectivity in it to say what's natural, what's not, what's intentionally making your body bigger and what's not. Like, it's just too hard to say what is what in that moment.
Yeah. And so much inconsistency, right? So let's go to Hassani Dotson picking up 2 yellows in basically a minute.
It was 40 seconds.
In 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a problem with either of these yellows?
I thought the first one, you could say that it's a little harsh. I mean, he slides in late on Zardes. I think it's arguable whether or not there's actually that much contact there. I don't know that it matters. I think it's one of those, like, Zardes jumps over him and ends up going down. I think this is one of those where, like, you don't necessarily need to make heavy contact for it to be a foul. And if you make a foul in that position from behind and get nowhere near the ball, then I think you could say that's a yellow card. I wouldn't have been upset if that wasn't a yellow card. But then once that one is given, and I think that one was given fairly consistently with the other yellow cards that were given. Like, he was giving them out fairly freely in this game, which was started out fairly physical. Like, both teams were going after each other, and he was not, like, Drew Fisher was not afraid to give out the yellows. And so he gives that one out. At that point, regardless of whether or not you think that first one was fair, Hassani Dotson has to be more careful in that moment. And he receives the ball, has a bit of a loose touch. Zardes pokes it away from him. And as he's trying to run past him, Hassani Dotson kind of leaves, like, I don't think he did a ton to, like, step in front of Zardes, but he did not try to get out of Zardes' way as he was about to run past him with the ball. And for that one, I mean, like, I think any other moment in the game, whether, like, if he hadn't been given a yellow 40 seconds before, I think that's a yellow card. And so, like, Dotson needs to be more careful once he is on that first one. So yeah, I don't have any problem with this particular call. I think Drew Fisher got quite a few calls wrong both ways throughout this game. I don't think this was one of them. I think this was fine.
Yeah, well, I forgot, you mentioned these, so that's another way that Jesse Zardes made a difference in the game, like pulling both these yellow cards.
Yeah.
It's one of, I mean, I know every referee is different, but I did feel like this is one of the game where Drew Fisher felt like Drew Fisher was the star of this match, and maybe not the players on the field, and that tends to annoy me. I mean, I know it probably shouldn't matter that much, but that's a sense I got out of this one.
Yeah, I don't know what his record is like in general, like if he's always giving a lot of cards, but it seemed like maybe he just saw how physical both teams were playing and was going to say like, okay, I'm not going to let this get out of hand. I'm going to kind of put my foot down now and try to control this game a little bit. But I feel like it maybe had the opposite effect where he kind of pinned himself in a corner. Is like, okay, I gave that one. I have to give this
Now
one.
I got to call everything. Yeah. So then 5 minutes later, Diego Rubio picks up the first and only goal of the match with Austin now playing a man up.
Yeah, so this one comes off of Alex Ring sends Biru through up the left-hand side. He dribbles inside, plays Owen Wolf towards the top of the box. He turns, switches the field to Gallagher. And we're talking about like all the crosses that Austin played last season. And I think I talked several times in the show about like a cross from that position is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's about what else is happening and how quickly you get it off and what's the state of the defense and how many players you have in the box. This is one of those moments where Austin had Minnesota in the right state to actually play across there and make it be something dangerous. Biru plays that ball across, and as soon as Owen switches the field to Gallagher, he gets into the box. We have 3 or 4 guys in the box there. And so Gallagher plays a really nice cross in towards the other side. And I think he was aiming the general vicinity of Zardes and Biru on that back side. And it's kind of like it's far enough out that Irwin has to come off of his line and go try to make a play on it. But far enough out that it's going to be difficult for him to get there. And so he gets out, does get a punch on it, and keeps it from getting to those guys hanging out on the backside, but doesn't get a clean punch to it. And so it falls to Rubio just right there in the middle of the box. Rubio does really well to just take that good composed finish and slot it past Irwin, who's way off his line at that point. So fortunate for Austin that Irwin kind of biffed that punch coming off of his line, but every other part of it was really well executed. And I think, just a good execution of the game plan at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then, so from there, like the rest of the first half is pretty evenly distributed between Austin and Minnesota. And then we go to the half with Austin up 1-0. And I think the second half is where I want to talk about, because like Minnesota has a lot of possession in the second half. If you look at your momentum chart, Minnesota has a lot of the momentum. And I've seen criticism that, Austin scores the goal and then bunkers for the last 65 minutes. I don't know if this is like worse, but I feel like Austin was a man up, but I feel like Minnesota was just Minnesota was like taking the game to Austin, and it wasn't that Austin was like letting the game happen to them. Do you have a different perspective on that?
No, I mean, again, I don't think it was bunkering by any means, but it did seem that they were playing a bit more conservative. And by that, I mean, if you look at like how far forward the fullbacks are getting, they're tending to stay significantly deeper. So they did lean a bit more conservative at that point, which I think is fine if you're able to keep the ball, which Austin did well in certain stretches of the game. But there was this chunk like halfway through the second half where Minnesota has a pretty substantial stretch of like sustained pressure on Austin. And I think that's really the main part where Austin kind of needed a wake-up call to say like, okay, we've got to get out of this half a little bit, keep the ball. And I think they were able to do that for another stretch of like 10 minutes or so after that. And then towards the end, Minnesota gets a few more chances by just throwing numbers forward. And it's what is the Korean forward's name? Jung Sing Bin. He had some real threatening moments throughout the whole game, but really late on had a few really dangerous moments that Austin either did well to minimize or fortunate that he didn't do a little bit better. I mean, overall, I would say that this was a very well organized game by Austin. Yeah, I don't think you want to invite that much pressure that early. And if you give up the possession, especially when you're a man up, like you don't ever want to do that. But the game state says like, you also don't want to throw a bunch of numbers forward and risk having all these super fast forwards that they have beating you on a counter. Whenever it's like, okay, you have 3 points in hand on the road. Let's not ruin this. So I think it's a fine line of trying to balance there. And I don't know that they were intentionally trying to invite all that pressure, but accidentally did, and did well with it. But they probably didn't want to see themselves in that situation.
Yeah, and part of that's just like we talked about the thinness of the roster, like because most Austin players look super leggy, right? Like I think one of the greatest things, one of the best things Owen Wolf brought to the table is he was like still actually able to run 80 minutes into the game, because that didn't seem like what a lot of the other guys could do. You know, then you see, as we've seen so many times, like Hunter Obrion has to come out 60 minutes in, CJ comes in, CJ has a really messy 25 minutes and then manages to injure himself, probably. So I mean, he comes out,
takes a really big, like a big collision on his thigh. And there was a moment not long after that where he was getting back defensively. And I was like, CJ, you should be sprinting right now. And he was jogging. And then 30 seconds later, he gets pulled. And I think it must have been from that injury, because he did get a yellow. I think another part of the reason why they pulled Obrion so early is because he was on a yellow card. And then CJ comes on, I think gets a yellow card within a few minutes of touching the field. So ideally, in the state that this team is, you don't want to have to sub off a sub, but that's what they ended up having to do and finish the game with Hector Jimenez as your right wing and John Kolmanich as your left wing.
It's not a great, but you know what? Ultimately, it's fine. Austin sees out the victory, picks up 3 against Minnesota United. I guess before we sort of transition into talking about the new players and doing the preview, I want to talk about Alonso Ramirez, like his performance, and then also just like the chippy nonsense at the end of the game, which I find very entertaining.
Yes, absolutely. Alonso Ramirez. I mean, he comes on. When did he step onto the field?
73. So this is by far the most significant amount of minutes he's gotten. You know, he got like 3 in the other performance.
Yeah, I thought he showed well. Like if it's a game where we're chasing a game and need to go get a goal, I don't know that I'd be super excited to see Alonso Ramirez. But in this state of the game, we're trying to manage a game, I think he'd be quite good at that. And I thought he showed himself quite well in this game. And then as you mentioned, your old buddy Kevin Arriaga with the silent R.
Yeah.
He seems like a crazy person. Like him and Biru were going at it all night. And then there's that moment where Zardes and Biru are trying to keep the ball. This is 88th minute or something, and exaggerate a foul a little bit to try to win the foul in the corner there. And Arriaga is doing some weird dance in his face, and
like a shimmy across the side of his face.
Yeah. Ramirez steps in and like puts his chest on his, like, I guess his like forehead on Arriaga's chest because of the height difference there. But you love to see that the second team guy stepping in. And I think I said this on a show earlier on, but Alonso Ramirez was announced as the captain of the Austin FC 2 team. And when he spoke to the media that day, I was like, oh, this guy is a captain. Like the way he carries himself, the way he speaks, like he's a leader. And it seems very obvious that like he was made to do this. Like he's just one of those guys who is a leader and it's like made to be a captain. And I think that showed on these minutes in this game as well. Like his composure was really good. He didn't do anything crazy, but did what he needed to do in the game, and then steps up and defends his teammates when he needs to as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. That was a lot of the post-game commentary, was people sort of appreciating the fact that he wasn't afraid, despite being a second team guy, to like step up and do that. Any other player notes you want to cover? Or you want to go into the?
I want to talk about John Gallagher.
Okay.
I feel like most of this season I've been fairly critical of him. And if I've brought him up on the show at all, it's been to say something at least slightly disparaging about him. I thought he had a really strong game in Minnesota. They were allowing him to receive balls that made it easy for him to kind of get around the edge. And I don't really like Gallagher in moments where he's forced to kind of combine inside or have to like have the ball at his feet and make a move on a guy or try to create something there. when he's at his best is when he can get around that edge and has some momentum behind him and get forward. And like, that's when he's at his most dangerous. And Minnesota was allowing him to do that all night. And Austin kept taking advantage of that. And so, yeah, I mean, credit to him on that cross in was really good against LAFC in this game. I thought he was really strong defensively and put in a really hardworking shift in both of those games. And so I just want to take a moment to just like give him credit for how good he was in those games. I want to talk about Biru as well. I think I've been pretty complimentary of him for most of the season. I think you could make a case that he is one of Austin's like top maybe 3 or 4 best players at the moment, as far as the kinds of performances he's putting out week in and week out. Like, would you argue with that if I said Biru is our 3rd best player right now? Actually, I'll take it back. I'm going to say 4th.
Okay, 4th. Well, now you're going to have to give the list. I was like, is he one of our best players? Yes.
Driussi.
Now that I have to slot him in specifically. Okay.
Stuver. The only other one I would put maybe there is Danny Pereira.
Yeah, that seems fair. He's up and down the field. He's a two-way player, right? Which Austin doesn't have a lot of, but he's making a difference on both ends, and it's what Austin needs more of.
And watching this Minnesota game, there was a few moments where players were having to give him notes on positioning and what he was supposed to do in certain moments, as far as whether he's going to step high and mark the wide player, stay deep and cover that inside channel. And so I think he is still learning. He's still kind of growing into the strategic part of it, but he is undeniable as far as his ability, both defending and attacking, and kind of his instincts going forward. Like, that is undeniable. And so I think they're fine with saying like, okay, we're going to eat a couple of the mistakes that he's going to make in those moments, just because he is so, like, his quality is so good in the rest of the game. And so, man, like, I want to talk more about the backline when we get into this next segment, talking about this new guy, but I'm feeling quite good about our backline heading in towards the back end of the season. I guess my last thoughts on these games, and kind of what I was referring to earlier, as far as like why I'm not so down on these performances, is Josh Wolf sent out the team that he could in these games, right? And I think the game plan was simplified, and the team played really organized games. I think the only thing that let him down was the lack of a cutting edge in the final third. And that, I think that comes down to talent. And so we have some of that talent coming in, but if this team can actually play organized, strategic games like they did in these last 2 games, I think that is what gets us, like, I guess what keeps us hanging around that playoff line. If, we're always going to be lacking that talent. And if we get Driussi back on the field, maybe that's enough to actually steal some points here and there. But the organization, the fight, the effort that was put forth in these last 2 games, even though they're not beautiful games, they're not the best games we've ever seen, I think they're probably about as good as this group of players can do at the moment. And so I think that's why I took some, I don't know, I didn't feel super bad about either of these games. And so I don't know, like, do you think I'm off base with that?
I think you have the context of the order in which you watch the games and not necessarily look. So, I mean, objectively, yes, that's sure. That's the way to feel about it. But I just, up until the Minnesota deal was sealed on Saturday night, after like having a draw that seemed like a loss because Austin had to leave for so long on Wednesday. And then like another match where you felt like Austin should have punished Minnesota, just being up a man and not seeing it. But still picking up the win, like, and knowing, I mean, I think, Mike and I talked about not having a lot of hope for Austin going into the week against Minnesota. And so then to like turn it around and have this super thin roster, but be disappointed in the outcome is just the way, it's the vibes, man. It's just the vibes.
I think that's
not
totally
the objective
fair.
results.
I think that's totally fair. And I agree. I think the order in which I watch these games, and also like I said before, seeing that LAFC scoreline and then seeing like, okay, they outshot us by a ton. I was expecting it to be a terrible game. And when I watched it, I was like, actually, this wasn't bad. They did okay. And so I don't know. I'm just thinking like, okay, if we can play that kind of like well-organized game and put Driussi on the field against
with more talent, I got you. I'm feeling
like
that.
I don't feel bad about it. Like we're not winning MLS Cup with that group, but I think it's good enough to keep us hanging around that playoff line.
All right, let's take a break, and then we will talk about the Austin. Well, a couple pieces of news about Austin FC's new guys. One totally new player, and two, we have one of the players that we knew were coming in the summer in town. So we'll talk about what that means for the roster going forward. Moon Tower Soccer's premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but only advertises on this podcast because it's the home of the two-time reigning Copa Teos champions, which is the most important trophy in professional sports. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information.
Moon Tower Soccer is also brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience. And if you want to be one of my neighbors, they're doing a lot of great work up in the Andersonville area. So, check out what Sage Wilson has going on.
If you are someone you know or need a Sage real estate advice in Austin or want to be Jeremiah Bentley's neighbor, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Check them out online at sagewilson.com. All right, we are back, Jeremiah. Let's talk about the new surprise signing. I guess there was a rumor about this a couple of weeks back, but got green smoke on Sunday afternoon. The official announcement today on Monday. It is Ukrainian center back Oleksandr Svatok. I think I'm saying this correctly.
As I read it on the website's pronunciation guide, I think you hit it. Yeah.
He's 29-year-old Ukrainian center back, currently playing for, oh God, we're going to really work our pronunciation muscles on this one. Dnipro, I believe is the way you say this team. This is an interesting bit. I've been really enjoying these last few signings, especially Bukari and Svatok, just like digging into their leagues and their background and kind of learning a bit more. So the Dnipro is a team that existed for a long time, went bankrupt, and then started a new team in, 2018, 2019, something like that. That's why you see the -1 at the end of the name. That's to distinguish them from the original Dnipro team. And so I just thought that was interesting. But anyway, he's been with them since 2020, currently with Ukraine at the Euros. So getting called into a Ukrainian team got a lot of really talented players on it. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of what level this guy's playing at. I watched some tape of him. I mean, he's a big game reading center back. I think he's listed as 6'1", like 175. He looks bigger than that on the field to me. So I don't know if he just reads bigger or if he actually is bigger than that, but big guy. I watched some tape of a friendly against Germany where I think they drew 0-0. He looked very competent in that game, playing against like an A- squad against Germany. And then also watched a game where he played 90 minutes against Italy in Euro qualifying game and was one of the better players on the field for Ukraine in that game. He's, like I said, he's a big physical presence. He has decent top end speed for his size, but not particularly fast or quick. But his ability to like read the game and react to plays is so good that like the speed doesn't matter most of the time. He's one of those guys. We talked about Driussi's Dennis Rodman like ability to kind of like look at his surroundings and just know where he's supposed to be.
Boom, click and go back this way.
He has the center back version of that, where I was on Y Scout and just like watching cross after cross, because you can split it up into like a certain type of plays, watching crosses get pumped into his box, and not by some scrub Ukrainian team. I watched Germany, Italy, and then with his club, I watched him play against Dynamo Kiev and Shakhtar Donetsk. So big teams playing in Champions League and things like that year in and year out, and with some really high level, expensive players on these teams. And he's as like the ball's coming in, he kind of checks his surroundings, and the ball seems to end up on his forehead every time. Or if he's in the box, he'll kind of read the surroundings as the pass comes in. It ends up on his foot every time. So he's just got a knack for reading the game, knowing where he's supposed to be. And because of that, I think his lack of speed just like doesn't factor in a lot of times. I would also maybe not call him like a super skillful passer of the ball, but he seems to understand that about himself and kind of plays within his capabilities. So he's not making wild passes or attempting crazy stuff all the time. He plays the stuff he knows he can do. And if he's doesn't believe that he's able to make a bigger thing, he just keeps it simple, which I appreciate that. But I saw some conversation online about like, is this guy coming in to be a starter? I think this guy, as soon as he gets integrated and kind of settled into Austin, like he's an instant starter. He's going to be the best center back on the team by far.
Wow, that's pretty high praise. And I mean, it seems like I was going through the contract stuff. So it's a 3.5 year guaranteed contract. So obviously this is not Austin has some things to cover up, and we're going to bring a guy in part of the deal, but this is obviously it's like a long-term fixture for the club. It seems to fit with like Butterell's overall preference to add European based players. And I'm assuming, given Manchester City's scouting network and what he had access to before, that this is a very well-known player to him. So with everything he's done, like I trust this is going to be a good move for the club. So I want to talk about.
And I think one thing to mention, this is a transfer as well. They're paying for this guy. This is not a free.
True.
I think he just renewed his contract in Ukraine and is guaranteed there through the end of 25, I believe. And so they're going to be paying for him. Transfermarkt had him listed as his value at $2 million. We know that's all kind of a guess. I saw somewhere else saying that the fee was going to be 1.2 million, but didn't really see any firm sources. But I think we could expect it to be somewhere between $1 and $2 million for the transfer fee. So they're investing in this guy. I think it means they believe in him. And from what I saw of the tape I watched, like I think he's worth that, and is going to come in and again be probably our best defender.
So if this is the expense of whom? Like let's talk about it for 2024. Like what do you think this means for the current roster? Because I know like guaranteed years, like Hedges is out at the end of 2024. Hindsight is only guaranteed through 2024. So looking at this as a long-term move, like clearly there's opportunity there, but like where do you see him when he slots in? Who's losing minutes, or do you see somebody going out in a either intra-league or somewhere else? It's sort of a related move, given that there's a somewhat long-term solution at center back for Austin that has just recently been acquired.
Yeah, I mean, I think any of the above is possible. Like we've said this on the show several times, and Burrell has kind of said it himself that everyone's for sale. And so I think if anybody comes in and is interested in Väisänen or Cascante or Hedges, like he's listening. And I think there's probably less of a market there for someone like Heinz Eich, who's on such a short contract and at the stage of his career that he's in. But like, I imagine if anybody wanted any of those other three guys and was willing to pay, he'd listen and probably deal any of those three guys.
One of the other things I keep seeing about this is like, well, there's some underlying narrative from people who seem sure that they know what's in Burrell's head, that like the reason that this is happening is because Austin's going to 3 at the back. I don't believe there's any reason to believe that this changes that, other than just more good players is a good thing. But obviously flexibility is good, and especially when it's a long season and people are going to be hurt, and Austin's still not that deep up top. The ability to do that from time to time is a positive. But like, do you see this as like some sort of like potential that there's like a shift upcoming, or is this just like there's a guy who's super talented and Austin's going to bring him in and do what they can with him?
Yeah, I think you make a good point that like it gives us that flexibility to be able to play various shapes and kind of have guys slot in at different roles. But I'm not convinced this is part of some big master plan to move to a 3 center back system. It very well may be. Like that may be what they end up doing, but I don't think that they're necessarily bringing in guys for that reason. Like you said, a lot of these center backs on the team now are on like expiring deals or possibly being shopped. So the fact that we have 5 center backs, I saw Mike Corniola doing some investigation earlier today about how many center backs a lot of teams have. And 5 is on the higher end, but it's not unheard of. There's a lot of teams who have 5 center backs. Again, like these moves, I don't think we should look at these moves as like we have 5 center backs. That means we have to use all these center backs. This is a move for the future. This guy was available now. And I think this goes to what Burrell has said. Like we're going to bring in the guys we can get at the time that makes sense. This guy's available now. He's a target for them. Is it what we need most right now in this season? No, but that's not what he's prioritizing. He's prioritizing what makes most sense for the long term, which is why he's not a striker. Like the right move or the right target as a striker was probably not available right now, or doesn't make sense as far as like what money we have available right now. But the money was available for a center back target, so they're going to bring in this long-term plan at center back. But yeah, I don't think having 5 center backs on the squad at the moment means we're necessarily going to try to move to a different base shape.
When I mentioned earlier, like who you think might be out. I mean, Michelle Sanchez and I had talked a couple weeks ago about sort of the mystery of if there was a mystery about Matt Hedges, because like Matt Hedges seemed to play a lot and do pretty good, and then all of a sudden he wasn't hardly playing at all, and now Brendan Hines-Ike was playing all the time, and wondering if there was one of these weird contract clauses with Hedges, which Hedges was signed after Burrell came in, but then Burrell has said like also, I think he said in the summer things were in place, when I got here I didn't stand in the way of him. So do you buy into that at all, that there's Matt Hedges might have some kind of weird deal where there's a reason he's not playing, or he's maybe the most likely to, or the other side is that it's like he's the most likely player to go because he's the one that's got the most MLS skins on the wall and probably has the highest value in intra-league transfer or trade?
I mean, it's possible. The fact that, I mean, like the deal did get signed after Burrell was here, right? You would think that if the tag team of Rubio, Wolf, makeshift sporting director was about to give him some deal where if he makes 12 appearances like Rigoni had, that he gets a guaranteed contract, that like Burrell would have said, no, we're not doing that. And the fact that we got Hedges on a lower number for this coming season as well, like it seems to be a smarter move than what was happening under Claudio Reyna. So I'm not so sure it has to do with some surprise clause. I think the other guys have just outperformed him. Like Brendan Hines-Ike was kind of a surprise. I think he was brought in as depth, and nobody expected him to come in and kind of be unbenchable for most of this season. So I don't know that I buy the that theory, but given what we've seen this year, I would also not be super shocked if it were true.
Nothing's off the table. And then one of the things I'll just ask you pretty quick. You talked about, okay, so if somebody goes out and it's an intra-league deal, do you have a dream player that you want that Austin might bring in, shipping out some whatever center back has the most value?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the best deal as far as dealing someone, I think it would be Cascante, because if we could actually get some assets for him, whether it be like Gam from another MLS team or sending him abroad. Maybe a Costa Rican team wants him after this Copa America outing. Like, if we could get some money for a guy who's on a longer contract, we have the guys to play for the rest of the season. We're not hurting for numbers there. Play out the rest of the season. Hedges contract expires. Brendan Hines-Ike contract expires. You can bring those guys back or not, but then you have this flexibility to choose if you want to bring those guys back or not bring them back and go out and see if you can upgrade at those spots and strengthen this back line even more. But Hedges seems to kind of be the easiest one, right? Andrew Wiebe is floating the idea of FC Cincinnati, I think, have 3 center backs injured right now. 2 of their starting 3 injured long term. They're facing like Kip Keller being a regular starter on their back line, which I don't know is necessarily a spot that they want to be in. So Wiebe's floating the case that, like, okay, Cincinnati should go after Matt Hedges. He's not starting in Austin. He's on a short contract anyway, so maybe he's like, he joined so recently that you'd be like, oh, maybe he doesn't want to move again. But if he's going to move again at the end of the season, why not now and go try to get some minutes in the meantime? So I don't think it's so crazy that he might get moved in this summer window.
Well, do you want to have any? You want to move on to Osman Bukari, which luckily we again got good news about. Like, one of the things that had come up a couple weeks ago.
Before we talk about him, I wanted to make a comment about the back line. So,
okay,
who would you say is our best center back at the moment?
I think the center backs that have been starting the last couple matches, I think for me, Väisänen and Hines-Ike right now is the best combo.
Yeah. Okay. I guess it's not even really important, the point I'm trying to make, but at the end of the season, I think it would be very easy to say, like, our best center back currently at the end of this season will be the worst player on our back line. Like, that's not a crazy thing to say, right? Dessler comes in and slots in. Svatok comes in and slots in. Biru is already one of the best players on the team. Whoever it is, like,
totally,
it's a very possible, I'd say probable reality that someone like Brendan Hines-Ike, someone like Väisänen, who have been performing quite well, is going to be the weakest link on our back line. That's crazy. Like, that's super exciting for me.
That is really good, but we still have to score goals.
that will come. This is the long term stuff.
Okay, I gotcha.
The stuff that we have in place now, I'm excited about. I agree. We need to do some turnover on the front end as well. But for a team that's like, we've never been good defensively, to have a back line that looks like it's going to be quite solid, like, man, I can't wait for that. Okay, sorry, we can move on to Bukari now.
No, let's talk about Bukari. No, I don't think there's a lot to say, except for a couple weeks ago, Josh had talked about hoping that the new guys got into town around the end of June, which is now. And then today we got the news that Osman Bukari is doing a meet and greet on Tuesday at, I think, Continental Club. So it's just good news that leads one to believe that, I think, of the two guys, just given their like background in American immigration laws, it was probably the one we were more worried about.
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
able to get here and get on board and get ready to go for July 18th. But the fact that he's going to be in Austin on Tuesday leaves me a lot less concerned about that, right? Like, he should be ready to go come July 18th at this point.
Yeah, really, for sure. And like, he's probably the one who needs the most time here as well. He's a younger guy, just given like his club background. I think he is probably the one of these 3 new guys who's going to need more time to kind of slot in and get integrated. And so the fact that he's going to be the first one here, I think, is really good news. So yeah, he should probably be training with the first team within the next week and a half, I say at the very latest. And so, yeah, by the time he's eligible to play July 18th, it's not crazy to think that he could feature in that game, if not start in that game on the 20th.
Yeah, he's also the one that's at the position of most need, right? Because the other guys we can make do. Just to your point, or just earlier on sort of the back line and where we are, that's the position of biggest need. So it's good to see him here. News-wise, otherwise, we got Copa America. I don't think Danny did not play on Sunday in Venezuela's victory. And as of the last time I checked, Julio did not start for sure. Costa Rica moved from a back 3 to a back 2. He was kind of the odd man out.
Yeah, I'm checking now. That game is over. And Cascante did not play in this game.
Did not play, which is okay. Like, you guys get your national team caps. Don't hurt yourself. Come back home. Be ready for Austin. So not a lot of news to report there.
Costa Rica did draw with Brazil, though, which I'd say, like,
for them.
As far as being happy for our guys, like, getting results is good, but I'd say selfishly, it wouldn't be the worst thing if Costa Rica and Venezuela both went out in the group stage and those guys got back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, got to come back to Austin. Yeah, no doubt on that.
What else we got?
I mean, I think we can just go ahead and go to the Sporting KC preview with Nick Bukati.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we're joined once again by Nate Bukati. He's wonderful as always. So yeah, hang tight. We'll be right back with our SKC preview. All right. We are pleased to be joined once again by Nate Bukati. Nate, how's it going, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, it's good talking to you guys. How you been?
Doing well. Even better on a week where we got some points in the bag, so can't complain too much.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the last couple times I talked to you guys, Austin were struggling. The first time I talked to you guys, I think they were struggling. Then they were starting to put it together. The game that I had in Austin, they scored that late winner, and it seems like they've been just kind of creeping up a little bit. Or is that how everybody feels there?
I think we felt like that for a while, and then maybe didn't feel that way for the last couple of weeks because we had a rough little patch before the international break, and then came back and had that loss in Colorado as well, and then I think the draw against LAFC,
3 in a row with the loss, huh?
Yeah. So I think it kind of depends on the day you ask how folks are feeling around here.
It's always handy. One of the things I always make sure I do when I get ready for a game is look at the form guide on MLSsoccer.com. If you guys ever check that little tab, there's probably other resources that have the same type of thing, but it just kind of shows you win, draw, win, and it has them color coded so you can kind of see the patterns. And I just did that with you guys. I should have done that before I hopped on because my impression was that you guys have been playing a little bit better, and that was such a big win this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but we'll get in. We'll probably have talked about this in the former segment of the show, but yeah, especially given the circumstances of who was missing in that game. Looking at Sporting Kansas City's form right now, I'm seeing a lot of red. One win against Seattle about 3 or 4 games back, but then mostly red leading up to that game and after that game. Jeremiah, before we get into previewing this, do you want to give us a little update on where SKC is sitting right now?
Yeah, just generally we can go into that. So it's SKC's 13th in the West, second most goals allowed in the league. I believe the most goals allowed in the Western Conference. Yeah, 3 straight matches lost, and then these clubs have already played once this year in Austin. Austin won that one 3-2. 2 goals from Hyder Obrion, who's on my Golden Boot team, so that was like a big week for me. It's like, yeah, Sporting KC not on great form, and also recently had some what seems from the outside a fairly significant change in the front office. This is as of today. Parted ways with the technical director. So, like, I mean, Nate, talk about like what's the vibe in Kansas City right now?
Yeah, so I actually do have this one for you, Jeremiah. There is one team that's conceded more goals this year in the West, and that's San Jose. I believe it's like they've conceded like 51. That's off the top of my head. But they just fired their manager today. So that's not company that you want to be in, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're performing at this level, people get fired or job changes happen. And you mentioned the technical director mutually parting ways with the club. That's Brian Bliss. So for those that don't know, Brian Bliss is former U.S. men's national team player, longtime friend of Peter Vermes. I mean, they played on the national team together. They've worked together for a really long time. And really the easiest way to describe what he's been is, Peter really has been the manager and the sporting director. He had both titles, Peter Vermees. And so Brian Bliss would basically go out and try to find him players. But Peter would have the final say on all those things. And that is the relationship that they've had until this coming season, or this season that we're in right now, coming into the season. They'd had some things go wrong. The team hasn't played as well the last few years as they did during that stretch where Peter Vermees had them winning 4 trophies in 6 seasons, I think it was, from 12 to 17. They won 4 trophies, 4 and 5, I guess. Anyways, they haven't played that well lately. They did have the late run last year to get into the playoffs, but they still finished like in 8th place. It wasn't great. So the owners decided, we're going to take the technical side or sporting side away from Peter and hire somebody to do that job so Peter can just focus on coaching the team. And they went out, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but they hired a man named Gavin Wilkinson to take that job. This was an incredibly unpopular decision with the fan base because of Gavin Wilkinson's past in the NWSL with some alleged, you can see all the things. It's out there, why the audience, why the fans, they didn't want him. So they protested, they were active on social media, and the team ended up backing out of the deal basically, and they parted ways. So Gavin Wilkinson he spent like a week on the job, and they haven't replaced him. Part of that news release that you just referenced with the parting of ways with Brian Bliss says that in the next coming days, they're going to make an announcement about the future leadership of the technical department. Did I get that pretty accurate there, Jeremiah?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yes.
What do you think that means for Peter Vermees? Do you think this is a warning shot saying, hey, we'll bring in someone else to actually, like you said, Vermees has been the boss there for a long time on every front.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, okay, you're just going to coach. We're going to give you an actual boss to run the other side of things for you. Do you think he's actually in trouble, or there's actually a chance he could go in the near future?
I don't think this is a warning, but I do think it is hey, we need to change something because things aren't going the way that we want them to go. And now you change this thing, and if that doesn't work, okay, maybe down the road we could be having a different discussion. But as I see the situation right now, I don't believe that Peter Vermees' job is in jeopardy. The owners come out and said so, and I know sometimes the vote of confidence, doesn't always go as far as people think, but I feel like I have a pretty good read on that situation and the dynamics at place. And so, no, I don't think Peter Vermees' job is in immediate trouble. But I do think they need to start winning, if that makes any sense, right? Like they're changing this, and now, are they going to start winning this year? They've got real roster problems. That's one of the things that the owner came out and said is that we're going to overhaul the roster after this season. And so that means that to me, that means the owner thinks that they have a roster problem, not a head coach problem. But how many times can you overhaul the roster? They got to get it right, I would think, the next time, but that still buys them some time, right? Like they've got one of their biggest issues on this team right now is their highest priced players are past their prime and not producing at that level. They're not a young ascending team. They have some young pieces, right? But that's not what they are. So that's why the talk of overhauling the roster is happening right now.
Yeah, talking about the roster, they have been missing quite a few pieces this season as well. Yeah. I know just last week on the availability report, I think it was 6 or 7 guys missing, including I think Shallowy was available. Pulido wasn't available. They've played Kyrie Shelton as a fullback a couple of times in the last little stretch of games. So they are kind of hurting for just healthy players as well. Like, who are going to be the biggest players missing this week? Are a lot of these guys still going to be out?
Yeah, I'm not really sure on the updates of a lot of those guys, to be perfectly honest with you. They have not caught breaks, right? Like I think that's fair to say. When it rains, it pours. But I do think that their issues are deeper than the injury list, right? Like I think that's something that one of the biggest things with this team this year was, and I don't know what the current number is, but at one point in time, they were like they were lapping the league in points conceded from a winning position. They would score a goal, like for the early part of the season, they would score a goal and then they would lose or draw. They just couldn't hold on to leads at all. Then it just started kind of snowballing into like, these are just some pretty poor performances, guys. You know, like that's the thing that's I think a little alarming right now. And so I'm sorry, I don't have an update on Shallowy. I know Peter Vermees is going to talk to the media tomorrow. And they might get an update on some of those guys, but I don't have any right now.
Yeah, regardless, even if one or two of them comes back, there's still a pretty long list of folks missing. And looking at, we make fun of FOTMob scores all the time, but it seems like Memo Rodriguez, short-time Austin FC player, has been one of their better players this season, which, like, happy for Memo. It seems like a good dude. I'm glad to see him succeeding, but if Memo Rodriguez is your best player, that's probably not a good thing in this league.
Bingo. Bingo. No, and that sounds like such a slap in his face. And it's not, I don't think any of us intend it that way, because I'm telling you, he is playing well. Like when you watch him, you go, best player on the field, or at least best player on Sporting side of the field, and one of the best players on the field. And I remember, I'm trying to remember which game it was I went to. I wasn't working it, and I went, and he was the best player on the field. Like he did everything that Sporting needed him to do to help them win that game, and it was like nobody was participating. So I don't want that at all to be. That just sounds like such a slap in somebody's face, right? To say that. And I don't mean it that way, because he's playing really well, and he belongs on the field with most teams in the league. I would say the way he's playing right now, he's showing to me. I think he's having one of those years where he wants to prove that he belongs in this league, and he's playing that way. Does that make sense? Like he's playing like I got something to prove, which I always love a player like that. And I think he sees the opportunity here. But I don't think you can say so much for some of the other guys. And he's not a DP player, right? Like if you know, you want your DP to be out there banging in goals and being the best player on the field, and that's not happening for them.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Willie Agada with 5 goals, Eric Tommy has 4 goals, Pulido 3 goals, 2 assists, Johnny Russell 3 goals, 2 assists. Pulido and Russell, those are two guys like at one point in time, not that long ago, were, you'd say, two of the more talented guys in this league, period. And they're not putting up the numbers that you would hope they would do anymore. Same with Daniel Shallowy. Yeah, it looks like he's played quite a few games and the numbers just aren't there. And so, yeah, it seems kind of across the board, just the performances aren't coming. I know Austin this season has been a bit of a slump breaker for certain teams. Like what does that look like this week in Kansas City? Like if that's going to happen this week, what needs to happen in order for Austin FC to, I guess, be that slump breaker for SKC?
Well, look, I don't like being this negative, because, you know, it's a club I really care about this club. You know, I do. They gave me my start in this business. They're my hometown team. So I don't take any pleasure in saying this, but you mentioned the one win they got against Seattle. That took a red card and Stefan Fry letting a ball through his legs. That's what it took for them to win that game.
So you're saying Austin needs to shoot themselves in the foot? I mean, not that we're not capable of that. We very much are.
Yeah,
we've done it a lot, Nate.
I try. Look, I get it. The last Sporting, that's the only one Sporting has since going back to mid-April. Okay, so like I know that Austin do not have the most prolific attack in the league. So if you mess around and don't score against them, you could be in trouble. Like, does that make sense? Like because they can score. Like Sporting, they can score. They're not the best offensive attack, but they can score. They got guys that can. Agata's been good. I like Agata. Some of these young guys that they're bringing in, like a Freefra, they're starting to seem like they're starting to kind of show that they might have a future in the league, and they're making some things happen in the attack. And Eric Tommy's a really good player when he's healthy, but he's been injured. So they can score.
Yeah, they've scored more goals than Austin has this year.
Yeah,
by 9.
So if you don't score against them, you could be in trouble because they're probably going to score a time or two, I would think, in the game. So they didn't score against. They got beat up by Columbus. Columbus has a really good defense this year, and I think they lead the East in fewest goals allowed. And so, that happened, but I don't think Austin's going to shut them out in Kansas City the way they've been playing. So but you should score against them because they just don't defend that well. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right?
Yeah. Looking at Austin's side of it, Driussi was out with sickness this last week. He was in team photos and stuff, traveled with the team. Didn't seem to be anything too serious. So expecting him to be back in Kansas City, regardless of the results and kind of fan sentiment, I thought the last 2 games against LAFC and Minnesota were some of the more organized games that Austin has played this year. So I think if they can bring that organization and bring energy, which I think was what was missing in the Colorado game, if they can kind of put those 2 things together and have Driussi on the field, there's a chance of scoring some goals. But they haven't been scoring a ton here lately.
Well, this ought to be the kind of medicine for them, honestly. I mean, Sporting went to a 3-man back line this last game, and then obviously they lost 4-0. So I don't know that they're going to be sticking with it. But it shows you how dire the situation is because Peter Vermees plays a 4-3-3.
Always and forever, right?
Yeah, I mean that's always the joke. Like Peter Vermees plays a 4-3-3. It doesn't mean they don't adapt some of their tactics and strategies and stuff like that within the formation, but he plays a 4-3-3, and they went to a 3-man backline last game. That's where they are now. And look, you mentioned organization. That's very good because first of all, they shouldn't. It stands to reason they wouldn't be good positionally in a 3-man backline when they only play a 4-3-3. They haven't trained it, so they trained it for a week. How good are you going to be from an organizational standpoint when you train a completely different formation for 3 days?
Yeah.
So do they go back to it? I don't know, but I would think that the organization would help. And the thing is, what also tends to happen with Sporting anymore is that they get separated. You'll see a run where you're going, where is the midfield? Because they're all either up or back. So if you're organized and you stay compact, I think it's you should have success.
The one thing I was gonna ask, because we've talked about the goal differential. What is the difference? So I think Sporting is pretty close to allowing as many goals this year as they allowed all of last year. Is it health? Is something fundamentally happened differently in the defense? What's the change from year to year?
Well, I do think the loss of Logan and Dembe is much bigger. This is my opinion because I've asked other people and they think I'm overstating it. But Logan and Dembe, when Sporting went on their run last year where they started winning and got themselves into the playoffs, they had the emergence of a good right back and a good young right and left back. Jake Davis really came on and just had an engine and just went up and down and played great defense and wasn't great in the attack, but offered enough, and would just make those lung busting runs and never run out of gas. Right. And then Ndembe started developing. He's a U22 guy. He's, he's just built like a left back. He's got legs this big around, and he's a short little guy and he can go. He's strong. He can run, he goes up and down, and he actually had a pretty cultured left foot. And so when they got that last year, this is my own uneducated opinion. they're not blessed with great pace at the center back position. Andreu Fontas is on the downside of his career, and he was never pacey in the first place. Very intelligent player, can read the game really well, but doesn't have any pace. And then, the other guys they pair with him are more athletic, but still not like, it's just not their strength. Pace is not like a strength of their center backs, but they got these two guys who in that system have to get up the field. And now all of a sudden they had young guys that could do it and get back and help in defense. And they got Radoya, who's their number 6 back. And Dembe going down, I think, was a big loss. I think it really was. Now, does that explain all of it? No, it can't. Losing your left back can't be that big of a reason, but it's part of it. I would like to know where this team is psychologically right now. There seems like a lot of discontent. You listen to some of the players, at one point Peter said after the game, Peter Vermees, we got to get rid of some guys. Or no, he said we got some guys that aren't committed. And they asked Shallowy, and he said, well, get rid of them then. If we got guys in here that aren't committed, get rid of them. And if it's me, get rid of me. That doesn't seem like a locker room that's in a great spot, does it?
Yeah.
And then when you combine it with the performances, I just think, I think the first thing to go when you're demoralized is defense. Because that's the not fun part.
Right. Yeah, you need to have kind of the dedication and the fight there. And if you're kind of like, we're going to lose anyway, what does it matter?
There was a goal, which 2 games ago for them. If you guys go back and watch, and I'm sorry, I've got so many games running through my head. I'm trying to remember who they played. They lost 4-3. And there was a goal where was it LAFC?
They played the Galaxy 3 games back.
Okay, who'd they play 2 games ago?
RSL. The Galaxy was 4-2. RSL.
Well, one of those games there was a goal
4-3.
In one of those games there was a goal where the other team had like 3 shots, and like Mealy made a save, and then one might have hit the post or something, but it kept spitting back out at the guy who was shooting it. And there were 1 or 2 or 3 Sporting players just kind of watched the whole thing. And then, oh gosh, we better, after the second save was made, they like snapped into attention and tried to get back there, And it's just things, you see things like that happening. There's like people kind of ball watching on big moments, big, like there's a goal to be allowed here, and they're just kind of watching. And I don't remember ever seeing that with the Sporting Kansas City team,
Yeah. It's definitely be interesting to see what happens this weekend. Jeremiah, do you have any other questions?
No, I just want to, Nate, I know you because we talked about this, like you got a family, you were putting a baby bed together, I think, before we talked to you. So we'll let you go and get back to that, man. Thanks for your time.
I honestly, I was playing in the sprinkler with my 4-year-old, and it was the best part of the day for sure. So, yeah, well, hey, it's always great having being on with you guys, and I love what you do. Anytime somebody wants to have a good conversation about the game, I'm up for it. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. We really appreciate it. All right, we want to thank Nate Bukati one more time. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever it's your podcasts. Come find us on Twitter at LVAHero87, JBentley_ATX, and then at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I think that's all of them. And then if you would like to support us in financial ways, check out the Patreon. We'll send you some cool stuff in return. If you want to support us in another way, maybe the financial way isn't going to work out for you right now. That's fine. Leave us the review, tell a friend, whatever. Come out to our show on Wednesday, our trivia night on Wednesday as well. That would be a great show of support as well. I think that's all. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with a review of the Sporting Kansas City match and a preview of the NYCFC match, and then cover whatever other Austin FC news comes. Till then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing. See you never.
La gente,
Oh my God.